In this video, you will watch arguments made by senior advocate Mr. Dwivedi. He was of the view that at the time of establishment of university at Aligarh, the Muslims were not a minority. He says that we should look into it also that whether they were the minority. He gave example of Jammu and Kashmir and how judges take this point, how judges responded to this. You will watch in this video.
The first submission which I wish to address is that to be a Muslim is one thing and to be a minority is another thing.
To be a Muslim is one thing, but to be a
minority.
What do you mean?
For example, if we are in Jammu and Kashmir, majorities of Muslims are not a minority. It's in that sense, the question therefore would be either we proceed on the basis of the assumption which was made in Aziz Basha that the Muslims in 1920 were a minority and decide whether they're entitled to the benefit of Article 30, or we consider the question actually on facts, not whether they were a minority in 1920, which requires, first of all, determination of the most vital question, which somehow has avoided the attention of this court in most matters, whether they were Christian colleges or whether they were Muslim colleges established before independence. This court has proceeded on an assumption that they were a minority. So how do we understand this concept minority? Do we decide this today in a bench of 7 judges when your lordships are sitting? Or we again, my lord, like TMA Pai say, that these questions are left over, my lord, to be decided later. This question was squarely there, my lord, in question 1 and question 3A. But all that TMA Pai decided was that minority will be decided state-wise. But what is this minority? Is it a numerical question? Does it have a qualitative content? Does it not require that the people who are now claiming to be a minority understood themselves to be a minority at that time? Only then this can be proceeded. So either we avoid it, we say that today in India, the Muslims are a minority, and therefore we will not, from that we jump to the conclusion that in 1920 also they were a minority.
But nobody has questioned that, Mr. Dwivedi.
No, I am raising this question, and that is referred. That is referred. The two referring orders, if your lordship will look, this is the question which has not been addressed. Volume 3A.
The question which has really been addressed before us is whether they are established and administered by
a minority.
Right.
Therefore, Lord, were you a minority?
That they were, that Muslims
so were you a minority?
The fact that they are a minority today in UP, and that the fact that they were a minority at that relevant point of time, because whether they were a minority or not has to be decided on today's standards.
No.
There's no different standard in 1920 as compared to.
That's precisely the point.
Just getting. It's just a question. That's the thought. Before the Constitution, adoption of the Constitution, we didn't have any concept of minority and majority. Certain rights have been given under the Constitution on which there is no issue in terms of the different articles from 25 to 30. Therefore, the determination whether you are a minority or not has to be done on the basis of a set time period, not in the past. When we refer to establishment prior to the Constitution, we'll have to go back in the point of time when the institute was established.
Yes.
But not with reference to whether that community was a majority or a minority community at that time, but with reference to who had established.
No, but
who is a minority or majority will be decided on the date when the Constitution was adopted. Possibly, what argument you are raising in case there's a demographic change, what will be the effect is a separate issue.
No, well, your lordships have categorically held in number of cases that fundamental rights are not retrospective. So therefore, only question is whether are you entitled to avail the benefit of Article 30 today? In order to do that,
will it be retrospective? Sorry, interjecting. Sorry. Will it be retrospective or retroactive then?
Whether it is retrospective or retroactive only means, Lord, that the law today takes notice of the facts earlier, that is retroactivity. When the law is retroactive, it doesn't mean it operates from that day, but it takes note of the facts as they existed earlier. So we are on the question of facts, an assessment of whether this community was a minority when it established. If it was not a minority, and if it did not consider itself to be a minority, then, for example, let's take the Christians, Lords. The Christians were the rulers at the time. The British government, which was ruling this country, was a Christian government. And the missionaries, Lord, were brought in this country with a particular purpose, as an arm of imperial rule. And being that, Lord, under the charters of 1813, 1833, the English Education Act 1945, the Wood's Dispatch of 1954, and the Hunter Commission and all these, Lord, commissions were really meant to provide an opportunity to the missionaries to establish the college, to create, Lord, people who were not fair like them, but they thought and whose tastes were like them. That was the objective. That is the great minute of Macaulay. Now, institutions which are established by missionaries to evangelize, to convert, to make Indians like British, and they were given grant of land which was occupied by them. Now, are we going, my lord, is this constitutional intent that Article 30 is to be given a benefit to these kind of institutions which were meant for a colonization purpose, for imperial rule purpose?
But that's not the character of AMU. Why should we decide that question?
Now, AMU question, therefore, we need to decide the question with, I'm coming to the Muslim minority.
What was the political unit within which AMU was then established? There was no state of Uttar Pradesh at that time.
Whether you take it as a state unit or national unit, for my submission, may not be very pertinent. But we have to take British India because Indian states were outside. Or we take the Northwest Province or subsequently the United Province as it was called. What was the status and position of the Muslims then? Could it be said in 1920 that they were a minority? The rule was of the Christian British rule, who were less than the Muslims. Neither the Hindus nor the Muslims, we were both subjects. We were not even citizens of Britain. There was no concept of citizenship, even that this court has said in Patro's case. So therefore, there is minority rule in India. That's the unfortunate part, not only in India, but in so many other parts of the globe, where the British imperialism was ruling. The position was that a handful of people were ruling over India for the last several hundred years. So are we to say, my lord, that the Mughals were in minority, the British imperialists were in minority? This will be something very, very strange, my lord, that after being a republic, we are trying to bestow a characteristic, a status of minority on those who were not a minority. The Muslims were more than the rulers. The Christians who were ruling through the Governor General and the HMG, His Majesty's government, they were smaller in number than the Muslims. Therefore, I request your lordships to first of all, instead of again avoiding to go into this question, please decide this question. It's too long, my lord, for 75 years and more, my lord, we have been evading this question. And we just assume and we stamp them as a minority institution and confer the benefit of Article 30 to them. According to me, there are three aspects, Lord, of this minority. And this is a question, Lord, which has been referred to your Lordships. The first referring order says, Lord, decide the essential conditions or ingredients of the minority institution may be decided once for all.